In November 2004, as coalition forces continued Operation Enduring Freedom across Afghanistan, small unit actions frequently occurred away from major population centers. The mountainous terrain of the Hindu Kush, with its extensive network of natural and man-made cave systems, provided ideal concealment for insurgent weapons caches and staging areas. What follows is an account of one such operation that defies conventional military reporting. The sources for this report, who have served with distinction in multiple theaters of operation, provided testimonies that, while extraordinary, remain consistent across separate interviews conducted over several years. The reader is invited to draw their own conclusions. The Hindu Kush mountain range, stretching over 800 kilometers through central and eastern Afghanistan, has served as a crossroads of civilizations for millennia. Long before American forces established their presence at Bagram Airfield in December 2001, these mountains had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Buddhist monasteries carved elaborate cave complexes into the limestone cliffs during the early centuries of the Common Era, creating an underground network that would later be used by Soviet forces in the 1980s and Taliban fighters in the late 1990s. The Persian cultural influence in this region runs deep. Before the Islamic conquest of the 7th century, Zoroastrian and Buddhist traditions intermingled with older pre-Islamic beliefs. Among these ancient beliefs was the concept of the div. Supernatural entities that folklore holds inhabit remote places, like caves and mountains. In the Avestan language of ancient Zoroastrianism, these beings were known as diver, a word originally meaning spirits or divine beings, which later evolved into demons through religious evolution. The modern Persian and Pashto word dev or di carries forward this ancient terminology, referring to malevolent giants or demons that dwell in darkness. Traditional accounts describe these entities as humanoid but of enormous size, possessed of supernatural strength and capable of sorcery. Folklore maintains they are active primarily at night, that their approach is often preceded by sudden temperature changes or a foul odor, and that they have an inverted nature, tending to do the opposite of what they are told. By 2004, Bagram Airfield had evolved from a Soviet-era facility into the largest U.S. military installation in Afghanistan. Home to over 7,000 American and coalition personnel, it served as the primary staging area for operations throughout eastern and northern Afghanistan. The base supported everything from large-scale combat operations to small unit reconnaissance missions in the surrounding Hindu Kush mountains. The cave systems in the Bagram area held particular military significance. During the Soviet occupation from 1979 to 1989, many had been expanded and reinforced for use as weapons storage and defensive positions. Following the Taliban's fall in 2001, these caves frequently served as weapons caches for insurgent groups. Standard procedure called for small teams to investigate reported cache sites, secure any materials, and document findings for intelligence purposes. It was during one such routine reconnaissance mission that the events described in this report allegedly unfolded. Staff Sergeant Michael Richards had been in Afghanistan for 7 months when he received orders for what appeared to be a standard cache investigation. A 32-year-old from Pennsylvania, Richards had served 2 previous deployments in Iraq and was known for his methodical approach to small unit operations. His team included Specialist James Halifax, a 24-year-old from Oregon, who served as the team's medic and had been in country for 4 months. The full team consisted of 8 soldiers, Richards as team leader, Halifax as medic, 2 riflemen equipped with M4 carbines, a machine gunner carrying an M249 squad automatic weapon, a grenadier with an M203 grenade launcher attachment, a communication specialist, and a combat engineer trained in explosive ordnance disposal. The mission briefing took place at 600 hours on November 15, 2004, in a standard plywood hut that served as the intelligence section's briefing room. Intelligence indicated that insurgents had established a weapons cache in a cave system approximately 12 kilometers northeast of Bagram, in an area with a history of Soviet military activity. The briefing officer, a captain whose name has been withheld, provided standard details: satellite imagery showing the cave entrance, known trails, recent enemy activity reports, and weather conditions. What struck Richards as unusual was the presence of the team's interpreter, an Afghan man in his 50s named Azizullah, who seemed unusually concerned about the specific cave system they were tasked to investigate. "This is a bad place," Azizullah said after the formal briefing concluded. "Local people, they do not go there, not even during the day." When pressed for details, Azizullah explained that the caves had a fearsome reputation among local villagers. "A very old place from before Islam came to Afghanistan. People say things live there that should not be disturbed." Richards, a practical soldier with little patience for superstition, dismissed the interpreter's concerns. "Every cave system in this country has ghost stories," he told his team. "It doesn't change our mission." The team's equipment load was standard for a cache investigation: night vision devices, tactical radios, demolition materials for destroying any weapons found, and sufficient ammunition for a 12-hour mission. Each soldier carried 210 rounds for his M4 carbine, while the machine gunner carried 600 rounds of 5.56 ammunition for the squad automatic weapon. They departed Bagram at 0800 hours in 2 up-armored Humvees, following a route that took them through several small villages before turning onto a dirt track that led into the foothills of the Hindu Kush. The drive took approximately 90 minutes, with the final portion requiring 4-wheel drive capability to navigate the increasingly rough terrain. The cave system was located on the side of a steep limestone ridge, approximately 400 meters above the valley floor. Satellite imagery had shown a main entrance large enough for vehicles, with several smaller openings visible at different levels of the cliff face. The area showed clear signs of previous military use: concrete barriers dating from the Soviet era, defensive positions carved into the rock, and the remnants of communication cables. Richards established a base of operations in a cluster of boulders that provided good visibility of the cave entrance while offering cover from observation. The team spent 30 minutes conducting reconnaissance of the area with binoculars and spotting scopes, looking for any signs of recent human activity. "No fresh tire tracks, no footprints around the entrance," reported the team's point man. "But there's definitely been vehicle traffic here in the past. The concrete barriers have been moved recently." The cave entrance was larger than the satellite images had suggested, easily wide enough for a truck to drive through. The opening extended back into darkness beyond the reach of daylight, and the team could see evidence of Soviet-era electric lighting, including the remains of cable runs along the cave walls. Azizullah, who had accompanied the team despite his obvious reluctance, pointed out several features that weren't visible in the satellite imagery. "See the stones around the entrance? Those are not natural. Someone placed them there a long time ago, before the Soviets, before the Taliban. Very old." Richards examined the stones the interpreter indicated. They appeared to be granite markers, roughly carved with symbols that looked far older than anything from the 20th century. Some bore what looked like religious inscriptions, scripts he didn't recognize. "Whatever they are, they don't affect our mission," Richards decided. "We go in standard formation, night vision, weapons ready. Halifax, you stay close to me. If we find cache materials, we document everything before calling for a disposal team." The approach to the cave entrance required the team to cross approximately 200 meters of open ground. They moved in standard tactical formation, with the point man 25 meters ahead of the main group, the machine gunner providing overwatch from a concealed position, and the remainder of the team spaced at 5-meter intervals. As they drew closer, several team members reported unusual environmental conditions. The temperature, which had been a moderate 60 degrees in the valley, seemed to drop noticeably near the cave. More concerning was an odor that became apparent within 50 meters of the entrance, a sulfurous smell that reminded Halifax of rotten eggs mixed with something organic and unpleasant. Could be natural gas seepage, suggested the combat engineer. These limestone caves sometimes have that. But Azizullah shook his head grimly. This is the smell that comes before they appear. We should leave this place. Richards ordered the team to halt 25 meters from the cave entrance to assess the situation. The odor was definitely getting stronger, and the temperature seemed to continue dropping despite the fact that they were in direct sunlight. More puzzling, several team members reported their equipment was behaving strangely. "Sir, my radio's getting interference," reported the communications specialist. "Just static, but it started when we got close to the cave." The team's night vision devices were also malfunctioning, showing unusual heat signatures that didn't correspond to any visible objects. Halifax noticed that his medical equipment, specifically his electronic thermometer, was giving wildly fluctuating readings between extreme hot and cold. "Equipment problems aren't unusual in these mountains," Richards told his team. "Lots of mineral deposits and old electrical cables could be causing interference. We proceed with the mission." The team entered the cave system at 10:30 hours, with Richards taking point and Halifax directly behind him. The main tunnel was wide enough for the entire team to walk abreast, though they maintained tactical spacing. The walls showed clear evidence of Soviet-era modifications: concrete reinforcement, electrical conduits, and ventilation shafts that extended deep into the mountain. The first chamber they encountered was approximately 30 meters from the entrance. It was a natural limestone cavern that had been enlarged and reinforced with concrete. Soviet-era ammunition boxes were stacked along the walls, most of them empty but showing signs of recent disturbance. More concerning were the signs of much older occupancy, carved symbols in the walls that appeared to predate the Soviet modifications by centuries, and what looked like the remains of fire pits that had been used repeatedly over a long period. "This place was used long before the Soviets got here," Halifax observed, examining the carved symbols with his flashlight. "Some of these markings looked like they could be from the Buddhist period, maybe even earlier." As they moved deeper, the environmental anomalies became more pronounced. The temperature continued to drop, reaching what felt like near freezing levels, despite it being mid-morning outside. The sulfurous odor grew stronger and was now accompanied by what several team members described as a metallic taste in the air. The team's equipment continued to malfunction in ways that defied easy explanation. Radio communications became impossible beyond the first chamber, with all frequencies producing only static. Night vision devices showed heat signatures that moved independently of any visible objects, and compass readings spun wildly without settling on any consistent direction. "Sir, this isn't normal equipment failure," reported the communication specialist. "I've never seen electromagnetic interference like this." It was Halifax who first noticed the footprints in a section of the cave floor covered with fine sand and debris. Clear impressions showed the passage of something much larger than human feet. The prints were approximately 18 inches long and showed what appeared to be clawed digits rather than human toes. "Could be bear tracks," suggested one of the riflemen, though his voice carried uncertainty. "There are brown bears in these mountains, but the spacing and stride length suggested something that walked upright, and the depth of the impressions indicated a weight far exceeding that of any known animal in the region. More disturbing, the tracks appeared to be fresh, with sharp edges that hadn't been worn down by wind or water." The team followed the tracks deeper into the cave system through a series of connected chambers that showed increasing evidence of long-term habitation. Ancient fire pits contained the remains of bones that looked suspiciously human, though Halifax was careful not to voice this observation aloud. The carved symbols on the walls became more elaborate and disturbing, depicting what appeared to be ritual scenes involving enormous humanoid figures. It was in the fourth chamber that they found evidence of the weapons cache they had been sent to investigate. Soviet-era AK-47 rifles were stacked against one wall, along with several crates of ammunition and what appeared to be rocket-propelled grenade components. But the weapons showed signs of being arranged rather than simply stored, positioned almost ceremonially around a central area that had been cleared of debris. "This doesn't look like a normal cache," Richards observed. "Someone's been using this place for something other than weapons storage." The central area contained what appeared to be an altar made from stacked stones, surrounded by the remains of numerous fires. The altar was stained with what looked like dried blood, and scattered around it were bones that Halifax recognized as definitely human in origin. Some appeared to be from children. It was at this point that Azizullah, who had been growing increasingly agitated as they moved deeper into the caves, finally voiced his fears. "We need to leave now. This is the place of the Dev. The old stories, they are true. Something lives here that should not be disturbed." Richards was about to respond when the team heard the first sound from deeper in the cave system. A low, rumbling vocalization that seemed to come from something with a lung capacity far exceeding that of any human. The sound echoed through the chambers, making it impossible to determine its exact source, but it was clearly coming from somewhere ahead of their position. "Everyone, hold position," Richards ordered quietly. "Weapons ready. Halifax, you stay with the interpreter. Everyone, else defensive positions around the chamber entrance." The sound came again, closer this time, and more distinctly vocal. It was followed by what sounded like heavy footsteps moving through the cave system toward their position. The entity that emerged from the deeper recesses of the cave system defied everything in Richards's military training and experience. It stood 12 feet tall with the basic form of a man, but built on a scale that belonged to no earthly creature. Two horns curved upward from its skull like those of a ram, but thicker and more prominent. Coarse dark hair covered its torso and arms in patches, not like fur, but more like the rough bristle of a wild boar. When it opened its mouth to speak, Halifax saw teeth arranged in 2 rows, not human molars, but curved, yellowed and sharp tusks, like those of a wild pig. The thing's hands ended in what could have been fingers or claws, thick and blunt, but clearly capable of tearing through steel. Its voice, when it came, resonated from somewhere deep in its chest cavity, a sound that reminded Richards of how heavy artillery felt when it fired nearby, something you experienced as much through bone conduction as through your ears. The English it spoke was accented but precise, as if the language had been learned through long practice rather than natural acquisition. "Who disturbs the old places?" it said in clearly understandable English. "Who brings iron and fire to the sacred caves?" Halifax later described his initial reaction as complete paralysis. "It wasn't fear exactly," he said. "It was more like my brain just couldn't process what I was seeing. This thing shouldn't exist, but it was standing right there talking to us." Richards, to his credit, maintained tactical discipline despite the unprecedented situation. "Team, maintain positions, but do not fire unless I give the order. This could be some kind of psychological operation." The entity seemed to find this amusing. "Psychological operation? You soldiers always think in terms of your small wars. This place was sacred before your people learned to make tools. The Dev have guarded these caves since the time when your ancestors cowered from larger predators." As it spoke, the temperature in the chamber dropped even further, to the point where the team's breath became visible in the beam of their flashlights. The entity appeared to be generating the cold as a side effect of its presence, and Halifax noticed that frost was beginning to form on the stone surfaces near where it stood. "What do you want?" Richards asked, maintaining his professional composure while keeping his M4 carbine at the ready. "What do I want?" The entity made a sound that might have been laughter, though it came out deeper and harsher than any human throat could produce. "I want you to leave this place and never return. I want your people to stop disturbing the old sites with your metal birds and your smoking machines. I want the world to return to the way it was before your kind learned, to make war on everything that moves." The entity moved closer, and as it did, the team could see its skin was scarred and patterned with what looked like deliberate markings cut into the flesh. The smell of sulfur and decay became overwhelming, and Halifax began to feel lightheaded from the fumes. "But since those things will not happen," the entity continued, "I will settle for your understanding. You have entered a place that belongs to powers older than your civilization. You will leave now, and you will not return. Your weapons cannot harm me, but I can harm you in ways that will haunt your dreams for whatever remains of your short lives." To demonstrate its point, the entity reached out with one massive hand and grasped a Soviet-era ammunition box that weighed at least 50 lbs. The metal container crumpled inward under its grip, with sharp, snapping sounds that echoed through the chamber. Richards made the tactical decision to maintain dialogue rather than initiate hostilities. "We're here on a legitimate military mission. There are weapons in this cave that pose a threat to civilian populations." "Weapons?" The entity gestured toward the stacked AK-47s. "These trinkets, they are offerings brought by those who still remember the old ways. Some of your enemies understand that there are powers in these mountains that predate your conflicts. They seek to bargain with forces they do not understand." This revelation added a new dimension to the situation. If insurgent groups were actively seeking supernatural assistance, it represented an intelligence failure of significant proportions. But before Richards could pursue this line of inquiry, the entity's demeanor changed abruptly. "Enough talk. You will leave now or you will not leave at all." The entity began to change, its form seeming to expand and become more bestial. The horns on its head grew longer and more prominent, while its hands extended into claws that looked capable of tearing through body armor. The temperature dropped so rapidly that Halifax could see ice crystals forming in the air. "Sir, we need to go," Halifax said urgently. "Whatever this thing is, it's not human, and our weapons may not be effective." Richards made the decision to initiate a tactical withdrawal. "Team, fall back to the cave entrance. Maintain formation. Keep your weapons ready, but do not fire unless directly attacked." As the team began to move toward the cave entrance, the entity followed at a distance, its massive form moving with surprising grace through the cave system. It did not attack, but its presence was a constant source of psychological pressure. "You are wise to leave," it called after them. "But remember what you have seen. There are places in this world that belong to older powers, and your people's wars are small things compared to the forces that sleep in the deep places." The team's withdrawal from the cave system was conducted under the most unusual circumstances any of them had ever experienced in combat operations. The entity followed them as far as the first chamber, maintaining a distance of approximately 25 meters, but never actually threatening violence. Its presence alone was enough to ensure the withdrawal proceeded at maximum speed, consistent with tactical discipline. As they approached the cave entrance, the environmental effects began to subside. The temperature returned to normal, the sulfurous odor faded, and their electronic equipment began to function properly again. Radio communications were re-established with their base of operations, though Richards made no immediate report of the encounter. Bravo 6. This is Bravo 6. Alpha, he radioed to their overwatch position. Cave system investigation complete. No immediate threat, but site requires further assessment by higher command. The entity stopped at the cave entrance, a silhouette against the darkness behind it. As the team reached their vehicles, it spoke. One final time, its voice carrying clearly across the 200 meters of open ground. Tell your commanders that some caches are not meant to be disturbed. The weapons you found are offerings to powers that your intelligence services do not understand. If you wish to fight your small wars without interference from older forces, you will leave the sacred places alone. Halifax would later report that he looked back at the cave entrance several times during their drive away from the site, and each time he could see the massive silhouette standing motionless in the opening, watching their departure. The team's debriefing at Bagram was conducted by intelligence officers who showed considerable interest in their report of weapons caches, but demonstrated skepticism regarding their description of the entity. Richards submitted a written report that focused on the military intelligence aspects of the mission, while noting environmental anomalies and possible psychological warfare elements without going into specific detail about the encounter. Halifax later told investigators that the intelligence officers seemed more concerned about the implications of insurgent groups conducting ritual activities in the caves than about the nature of the entity the team claimed to have encountered. They kept asking about the altar and the bone remains. They wanted to know if we thought this was evidence of a death cult or some kind of psychological intimidation campaign. The weapons cache that the team had documented was never officially recovered. Subsequent satellite imagery showed that the cave entrance had been sealed with what appeared to be a rockfall, though no seismic activity had been detected in the area. When a second team was dispatched to investigate the site 3 weeks later, they found only rubble blocking the entrance with no signs of the entity or the weapons that had been reported. Both Richards and Halifax were subsequently reassigned to different units, though officially this was described as routine personnel rotation. Neither soldier reported any further supernatural encounters during their remaining time in Afghanistan, though both acknowledged in later interviews that they avoided operations in cave systems whenever possible. Azizullah, the interpreter who had accompanied the team, resigned from his position with coalition forces shortly after the incident. In his final interview with military personnel officers, he reportedly said, "Some places are better left alone. The Americans think they can solve everything with guns and radios, but there are older powers in these mountains that do not care about your politics." The account provided by Richards and Halifax, while extraordinary, is not without precedent. In the folklore and historical records of the Afghanistan region, the entity they described matches closely with traditional descriptions of the Div in Persian and Pashto folklore, supernatural beings of enormous size and strength, possessed of intelligence and magical abilities, dwelling in remote caves and mountains. Academic sources confirm that belief in such entities was widespread throughout the Persian cultural sphere, long before the arrival of Islam. The transformation of ancient deities into demonic figures occurred gradually, over centuries, as new religious traditions replaced older beliefs while incorporating elements of the previous mythology. Dr. Ahmad Samadi, a professor of Persian literature at Tehran University, who has studied the evolution of Div folklore, notes that these entities are typically described as having an inverted nature, being most active at night, and possessing the ability to influence their environment in ways that suggest supernatural power. They are often portrayed as guardians of ancient sites or treasures, hostile to human intrusion but capable of bargaining with those who approach them properly. The cave systems of the Hindu Kush have indeed served religious and military purposes for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence confirms the presence of Buddhist monastic communities in the region from the early centuries of the Common Era, and many caves show signs of continuous occupation through various historical periods. The mixing of religious traditions in these areas created a complex mythology that incorporated elements from Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and pre-Islamic local beliefs. The psychological aspects of the encounter cannot be dismissed. Combat stress, environmental factors, and cultural suggestion can combine to create powerful hallucinations or misperceptions. The isolation of cave systems, combined with the knowledge of their historical use for religious purposes, could certainly influence the perceptions of soldiers already operating under high-stress conditions. However, the consistency of the accounts provided by Richards and Halifax, along with the physical evidence they reported, the temperature changes, equipment malfunctions, and the specific nature of the entity's appearance and behavior, suggests something beyond simple hallucination or cultural projection. Military psychologist Dr. Starkey, who has studied combat stress reactions in Afghanistan veterans, notes that while hallucinations are not uncommon in high-stress combat situations, shared hallucinations with consistent details are extremely rare. When multiple individuals report the same unusual phenomena, it suggests either a coordinated deception, which seems unlikely given the military context, or an experience that had some basis in external reality. The intelligence implications of the encounter are perhaps more significant than the supernatural aspects. If insurgent groups were indeed using cave systems for ritual purposes, whether genuinely supernatural or simply psychological, it represents a dimension of the conflict that was not adequately understood by coalition intelligence services. The use of sacred sites for military purposes has a long history in Afghan warfare. During the Soviet occupation, Mujahideen fighters frequently used religious sites as bases of operations, knowing that Soviet forces would be reluctant to attack locations of cultural significance. The Taliban similarly mixed religious and military functions in ways that complicated coalition operations. If the entity encountered by Richards's team was genuine, it suggests that some insurgent groups may have been seeking assistance from sources outside conventional political or military frameworks. The entity's statement that weapons found in the cave were offerings implies a level of supernatural belief among some fighters that goes beyond simple religious motivation. Following the initial incident, military intelligence conducted a broader survey of reported anomalous encounters in Afghanistan cave systems. While most reports could be attributed to combat stress, equipment malfunction, or environmental factors, a pattern emerged of incidents involving cave systems that had historical religious significance. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Martinez, who served with military intelligence at Bagram from 2004 to 2005, reported that we received approximately 24 reports over an 18-month period of unusual encounters in cave systems throughout eastern Afghanistan. Most of them involved equipment malfunctions, strange sounds, or environmental effects that couldn't be readily explained. The common factor was that these caves had been used for religious purposes in the past. A declassified military intelligence report from 2005, obtained under Freedom of Information Act requests, notes that insurgent groups in eastern Afghanistan appear to be utilizing cave systems not only for weapons storage and tactical purposes, but also for activities that may be religious or psychological warfare in nature. Personnel conducting operations in these areas should be prepared for unconventional forms of intimidation. The report goes on to recommend that cave-clearing operations should be conducted with cultural sensitivity, advisors present, and personnel should be briefed on local folklore and beliefs that may affect their psychological readiness for operations in culturally significant sites. Dr. Robert Kellner, an anthropologist who served as a cultural advisor to coalition forces in Afghanistan, observed that the line between religious belief and psychological warfare is often blurred in asymmetric conflicts. Whether these cave encounters represent genuine supernatural phenomena, sophisticated psychological operations, or simple cultural misunderstanding, they had real effects on military operations and morale. The pattern of cave-related incidents appears to have declined after 2006, coinciding with changes in coalition tactics that placed greater emphasis on working with local communities rather than conducting unilateral operations in culturally sensitive areas. Whether this represents a genuine reduction in supernatural encounters or simply a change in operational procedures that reduced exposure to such incidents remains unclear. Richards and Halifax completed their deployments in Afghanistan without further incident. Both returned to civilian life and have maintained their account of the cave encounter despite the obvious skepticism it has generated among military personnel and researchers. In a final interview conducted in 2019, Halifax reflected on the incident. "People can believe what they want to believe. I know what I saw, and I know it wasn't natural. Whether you call it a div, a demon, or something else doesn't change the fact that there are things in those mountains that we don't understand." Richards, now working as a security consultant, remains equally steadfast in his testimony. The events of November 15, 2004 continue to be discussed and debated in hushed tones within certain military and intelligence circles, a ghost story that lives on, not in the realm of folklore, but in the official records of a modern war.